Hey everyone, Israel is currently in a war against the terror organization Hamas, and we know how hard it can be to keep up with all the news. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of the latest developments out of Israel, we're here for you. I'm Ladar Gavelazi, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review.
Well, the strike on Majdal Shams, in which 12 were killed, is in fact the deadliest Hezbollah strike into Israel since the start of hostilities in October. Israel is at this hour considering what is to be expected to be a deep retaliation deep into Lebanon and what could be the start of a full-blown war in the north. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
It was a Hezbollah massacre in the Golan Heights. 12 people were killed, mostly children and teens, and dozens more were wounded when a Hezbollah rocket fired from Lebanon hit a soccer field in the northern Druze town of Majdal Shams in the Golan Heights. It was the single deadliest Hezbollah attack on northern Israel since cross-border fighting there began in October. Residents and first responders described scenes of bloody carnage on the pitch. Though a warning siren had sounded, it was too short of an alert for the victims who were unable to flee in time. All 12 fatalities were aged between 10 and 20. Dozens of wounded remain in hospital, including some with life-threatening injuries. Defense Minister Gallant told the mayor of Majdal Shams that Hezbollah will pay a very heavy price.
תמסרו בשמי, בשם כל מערכת הביטחון למשפחות את ההזדהות שלנו באירוע הקשה מאוד הזה. זה טרגדיה נוראית. ילדות תמימים, שזה פשוט כואב הלב. ואנחנו, אמרתי לך, חיזבאללה אחראים לזה והם ישלמו מחיר.
IDF Chief ILTV visited the site and said the army is ready to take action.
זו רקטה של חיזבאללה. ומי שיורה רקטה כזו לתוך שטח בנוי רוצה להרוג אזרחים, רוצה להרוג ילדים. אנחנו מעלים מאוד את המוכנות שלנו לשלב הבא, ללחימה בצפון. אנחנו במקביל נלחמים בעזה. אנחנו יודעים לתקוף גם רחוק מאוד ממדינת ישראל. יהיו יותר אתגרים, אנחנו נעלה את המוכנות. כשידרש נפעל חזק.
Prime Minister Netanyahu made clear that a response was coming.
אני אכנס מיד את הקבינט הביטחוני עם הגעתי. אני יכול להגיד שמדינת ישראל לא תעבור על כך בשתיקה. לא נעבור על כך לסדר היום.
IDF fighter jets struck Hezbollah targets across Lebanon overnight. The targets were in the Bekaa Valley, near Tyre, and in several other areas of South Lebanon. A full-scale military operation could potentially include bombing military targets and infrastructure in Beirut, the Lebanese capital, and a ground operation up to the Litani River in South Lebanon.
Well, after the massacre in Majdal Shams by Hezbollah, Israelis, Lebanese, and the entire world seem to be anticipating a major military response from Israel. While many countries have condemned Hezbollah's barbaric attack on children, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the sponsor of Hezbollah, warned Israel against military escalation with Lebanon. Now, here to discuss the next steps is Brigadier General in Reserves Amir Avivi, the founder of Habitronistim. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, in the aftermath of this massacre, what can we expect to see in terms of a military response in Lebanon?
Well, let me first express my condolences to the Druze community of Majdal Shams. Really a terrible, devastating attack with 12 children dead. Even before the attack, we recommended to the Prime Minister to be ready for a full-scale attack in Lebanon because there is no way to really bring back 80,000 displaced Israelis safely back to their homes in the north without militarily pushing Hezbollah out of South Lebanon and also attacking all the infrastructure of Hezbollah all over Lebanon. Now, this should be Israel's war goal. It shouldn't happen immediately because of this terrible event. It needs to be planned and conducted according to a planned timetable. So I think that at this stage, I would expect to see an attack, a retaliation, but not one that will bring a war that will be uncontrolled and unplanned. But having said that, we need to get ready and decide when are we going to war in the north.
In the aftermath of this strike, after it became clear that 12 children were indeed killed, Hezbollah attempted to deny that it was their rocket. Why do you think we're seeing this sort of retraction from Hezbollah? Are they worried about Israel's response? Is it a PR ploy?
I think that they're worried about the response of the Druze communities in Syria and in Lebanon. Although I heard the leader of the Druze in Lebanon, Jumbalat, basically backing the Hezbollah in Iran and talking against Israel. I've talked to some of our leading generals who are Druze. They were shocked by his behavior. And I think that the Druze community in Lebanon is not supportive of this kind of appeasement towards Hezbollah. I would expect the Druze community to avenge and retaliate the children. And also, I think that Hezbollah feels that this is not the moment for them to go to a full-scale war, and this is why they're trying to find excuses, maybe to prevent a major war with Israel.
Well, it's very interesting developments. We'll have to follow this closely. We are unfortunately out of time, but I want to thank you so much for joining us, as always, with your insight.
Thank you.
Well, Israel has confirmed responsibility for the targeted killing of Hezbollah commander Fuad Shukr in Beirut. Hours after searching the rubble in the building struck by Israeli missiles, Hezbollah confirmed Shukr's death. The IDF targeted Shukr in a building in the Hezbollah stronghold of Darkhia in Beirut. The strike followed days of intensive diplomacy aimed at curbing Israel's response to Saturday's rocket strike on Majdal Shams. While taking responsibility for the attack, Israel said Shukr was responsible for the missile strike on the Golan Heights in Majdal Shams that killed 12 young Israelis on a soccer field and other attacks that killed Israeli civilians.
The IDF will not tolerate terrorist attack on Israeli civilians. We have been responding to these attacks with precise strikes on Hezbollah commanders, terror operatives, and military infrastructures in Lebanon. Hezbollah's ongoing aggression and brutal attacks are dragging the people of Lebanon and the entire Middle East into a wider escalation. While we prefer to resolve hostilities without a wider war, the IDF is fully prepared for any scenario.
Shukr was considered by Israel to be the terror group's most senior military officer and right-hand man to Chief Hassan Nasrallah. He was also wanted by the U.S. for his role in the 1983 attack on the Marines in Beirut. Vice President Kamala Harris stated support for the Israeli action.
I want to address what's happened over the last few hours in terms of the Middle East and be very clear. Israel has a right to defend itself, and I unequivocally support Israel's right to remain secure and to defend the security of Israel. What we know in particular is it has a right to defend itself against a terrorist organization, which is exactly what Hezbollah is. But all of that being said, we still must work on a diplomatic solution to end these attacks, and we will continue to do that work. Thank you all.
Meanwhile, the number of airlines canceling flights to Beirut has continued to rise, with international carriers scrambling to stay away from any escalation in violence across the border. Following the Israeli strike, it's unclear whether the situation in the north will continue to escalate toward all-out war. There's also speculation that following the two assassinations in Beirut and Tehran over the past 24 hours, there could be a combined Iranian-Hezbollah response. Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas are vowing revenge after two high-profile assassinations in 24 hours. Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh was killed in a targeted attack in Tehran this morning. Israel is accused of carrying out the assassination, but has not claimed responsibility. ILTV editor-in-chief Mayan Hoffman has more of the details on the killing of the Hamas political leader in Iran.
Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh was killed in Iran this morning, both the terror group and the Iranian Revolutionary Guards confirmed, accusing Israel of carrying out the act they described as a treacherous Zionist raid on his residence in Tehran. Haniyeh was in Tehran to attend Iran's new president's swearing-in ceremony yesterday. He was reportedly killed in his Tehran home alongside one of his bodyguards. Israel has yet to claim responsibility for the targeted killing, which, according to the latest reports, took place at around 2 a.m. Haniyeh was last seen the day before when he met with Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, and attended the inauguration ceremony for the Iranian president. Haniyeh was elected head of the Hamas political body in 2017, succeeding Khalid Mashal. He had previously served as Palestinian prime minister in 2006. He left the Gaza Strip in 2019 and lived in exile in Turkey and Qatar, as well as having a residence in Tehran. Both Hamas and Iran vowed revenge for the killing. Hamas described the strike as a severe escalation that would not achieve its goals. One member of the Hamas political bureau, Musa Abu Marzouk, warned that the assassination would not pass in silence. Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas himself condemned the killing, calling it a cowardly act and urging Palestinians to remain united against Israel. There is concern that the assassination will derail the hostage negotiations between Israel and Hamas. Haniyeh had said on February 28th that the Islamist group was showing flexibility in talks with Israel over the Gaza war, but at the same time was ready to continue fighting.
آلامه الكبيرة وتضحياته الجسام في حرب الإبادة الوحشية ضده يوازيها استعداد للدفاع عن شعبنا.
This was the second high-profile assassination attributed to Israel in less than 12 hours, coming after an airstrike in Beirut that killed a top Hezbollah military leader responsible for the attack on Majdal Shams in northern Israel over the weekend. Shortly before his assassination, Haniyeh accused Israel of failing to win the war against Hamas.
وأنا أستطيع أن أقول رغم الأثمان الباهظة والمروعة التي دفعها الشعب الفلسطيني ودفعتها غزة إلا أن الكيان الصهيوني فشل.
However, given that Haniyeh has long been among the top Hamas leadership held responsible for the October 7th atrocities, is that he is the most senior Hamas official killed since the war started, and on the list of terror leaders that Israel vowed to eliminate this war, it seems the country is one step closer to victory. Haniyeh is expected to have a ceremonial funeral tomorrow in Tehran. Then his body will be transferred to Qatar, where it will eventually be buried.
Shocking comments made by Turkish President Erdogan, who on Sunday threatened to invade Israel, further escalating tensions between the two countries. His comments were widely condemned as calls are being issued to expel Turkey from NATO. The president of Turkey, Tayyip Erdogan, issued an open threat on Sunday that his country could invade Israel to support the Palestinians.
Biz nasıl Karabağ'a girdiysek, nasıl biz Libya'ya girdiysek, bunun benzerini aynen onlara da yaparız. Yapmamak için hiçbir şey yok. Sadece biz güçlü olmalıyız ki bu adımları da ne yapalım? Atalım.
He made these remarks while speaking to members of his AK party at a Black Sea province in northeastern Turkey. Erdogan has been a fierce critic of Israel and since October 7th has become a staunch supporter of Hamas, even hosting its leadership in Istanbul, and cutting all ties, including trade ties, between Israel and Turkey. And mere hours after his threat to invade Israel, Turkey's foreign ministry compared Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to Nazi leader Adolf Hitler and threatened he would meet his end. Israeli and foreign leaders responded harshly to Erdogan's threats, even calling for Turkey to be ousted from NATO. Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz condemned Erdogan in a post on X, comparing him to Saddam Hussein, saying he is following in his same path and threatens to attack Israel. He warned Erdogan needs to remember what happened there and how it ended. Meanwhile, opposition leader Yair Lapid called on NATO members to condemn the outrageous threats and expel Turkey from the organization. And Dutch politician Geert Wilders called Erdogan an Islamofascist, adding that he is totally nuts. He also joined calls to kick Turkey out of NATO. And moving on, the UK under Keir Starmer is considering halting arms sales to Israel in the latest string of anti-Israel policies taken by the new Labour Party government. All the details in the following report. The UK, under the new Labour Party, may decide to cease exporting arms to Israel in the near future. This is the concern from Jerusalem. While multiple Hebrew-language media sites speculated the move could be confirmed as early as Tuesday, other news outlets reported that the British government confirmed it would not issue an update on the matter as of yet. UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy announced his intentions to assess the legal situation regarding the use of British weapons in Gaza, and has advocated that the UK should suspend weapon sales to Israel if they were found to be used in breach of humanitarian law. Though he said that the UK would not suspend all UK arms exports, as it would allow for defensive weapons. This move would follow other steps taken by the new Labour government under Prime Minister Keir Starmer against Israel, including restoring funding to UNRWA, which was suspended by the previous government after the extent of the terror ties between UNRWA and Hamas were revealed. UNRWA employees participated in the October 7th massacre, and UNRWA schools were used by Hamas as bases to carry out terror attacks against Israel. Hamas facilities were also found directly underneath UNRWA's headquarters, which supplied the terrorists with electricity. The new Labour government has also withdrawn objections to the International Criminal Court's request for arrest warrants against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defence Minister Yoav Gallant. The concern from Jerusalem now is that should the UK go forward with this move, other countries may soon follow suit. The UK, under Keir Starmer's Labour Party, has taken a number of steps against Israel, from reinstating funding for UNRWA to withdrawing its objections to the ICC's request for arrest warrants against Israeli officials, and now possibly ceasing weapons sales to Israel. Joining us to discuss this policy shift and its impact on UK-Israel relations is writer and political commentator Adam Schwartz. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you.
So let's start with the potential suspension of arms sales. I mean, Jerusalem is reportedly very concerned over this move. How much of an effect will it have on Israel and on the war effort?
Well, I think it's worth noting, just to begin, that of course the UK government doesn't directly sell weapons to Israel, but of course it approves export licenses, which have been quite significant. Since 2015, it had about £500 million worth of exports. But as you've mentioned, Foreign Secretary David Lammy has ordered a review into the use of British weapons in Gaza by Israel, and particularly due to its kind of incompatibility with international law. So we'd expect the kind of outcome of that review and a decision really by the end of the summer. But in terms of the impact that it would have on Israel's war effort and its capabilities, that really does largely depend on the kind of halt that the UK would impose on weapons. So, for example, David Lammy did mention the fact that actually this would largely be related, if it happened, due to or would largely affect offensive weapons rather than defensive weapons. And I would say that if you look at the kind of weapons that are supplied to Israel from the UK, there's really nothing that's particularly kind of irreplaceable. And really, Israel, with time, could largely replace a lot of it through other sources, particularly from the US, I would say. I would say the primary impact of this would kind of be diplomatic. So, for example, I would say that the main impact would actually be that it would largely legitimize the conditioning of aid to Israel to try to influence Israeli policy in some way. So, of course, we could see other Western allies take the same approach, which wouldn't be a particularly kind of unusual approach in terms of conditioning aid on policy. But I would say that would be the primary concern of the Israeli government at this time.
Mm-hmm. And, the new Labour Party has also reinstated funding for UNRWA and withdrawn its objections to the ICC. It seems to have sort of come in and flipped British foreign policy with regards to Israel on its head in many regards. Is the Labour Party under Keir Starmer hostile to Israel, do you think?
I wouldn't describe it as being hostile. I mean, I think there have been some shifts. Of course, you mentioned the ICC decision and also the UNRWA decision as well, certainly compared to Conservative Party. But I would say even if you look at the Conservative Party and its history and record on Israel, in 2014, David Cameron's government drew up a list of weapons that would be being used by Israel at the time in Gaza and said that it wouldn't actually be supplying them if the conflict continued. So I don't think it's a major shift that we've seen. And I think really if you look at Keir Starmer's record, he wrestled the leadership of the Labour Party away from kind of Jeremy Corbyn, a far left figure who was kind of known for his anti-Israel policies. That was a core part of his persona. And if you look at really Keir Starmer's record, particularly since 7th of October, he has repeatedly reiterated Israel's right to self-defense. He has been very cautious in terms of his criticism of Israel. He has not used the kind of language in which many in his party have wanted him to. He's focused on issues of trying to get aid into Gaza rather than to do with issues of criticizing Israel's military. And he's also, been very supportive of when the UK participated in attempts to try to, knock down the Iranian projectiles that were fired from Iran just a few months ago. But look, the reality is that the Labour Party are on the left wing of British politics, and so you are going to see more internal opposition to Israel from within the government. But really what I would say is you're going to see a kind of emergence of a foreign policy that is supportive of Israel, but actually not supportive of the Netanyahu government. But again, you also have the UK supporting other ways of supporting its kind of continued policy. For example, it's maintained under Keir Starmer its kind of strikes against the Houthis. So overall, I think, the UK government still sees itself as quite supportive, but it doesn't see its kind of support as completely unconditional, particularly on issues relating to, let's say, this two-state solution.
And, we're almost out of time, but I just want to hear from you. How has this string of new measures affected Israel-UK relations, if at all?
I mean, the new British government has only been in place for about 3 weeks, so really, we haven't had any indications from diplomatic sources on either sides of any kind of major upset in relations. We know Foreign Secretary David Lammy visited Israel, I think, last week and met Netanyahu, which of course is a very positive thing. But, look, Starmer and David Lammy did meet with Israeli ambassador to the UK, Hutaveli, throughout their time in opposition. And so certainly relations are not kind of starting from scratch at this point. But I think we are going to see relations come under quite a bit of strain. But I think, largely the kind of main issues of UK supporting Israel to do with its defence will largely remain intact. But I think where the UK government sees it can provide a kind of constructive role in terms of trying to encourage Israel to support a peace process, I think it won't be shy about doing that.
All right, Adam Schwartz, thank you so much for your analysis today.
Good to be with you.
And in a grave and unprecedented incident, 9 IDF soldiers are being held for suspected abuse of a Palestinian terrorist in this Delegitimization detention facility. The incident has sparked protests by right-wing activists who stormed the IDF base over their detention. Meanwhile, the accusations against the soldiers have drawn widespread condemnations from political and military leaders. ILTV's Ariella Lachiani has more. Ariella, what can you tell us about this incident?
Yes, Adar. So last night, far-right activists broke into a military base where IDF soldiers were being held for allegedly abusing a Palestinian detainee. Activists and participators included far-right Knesset members. IDF Chief of Staff Halevi has condemned the attack and stated that this has just harmed the army and the war effort. And President Herzog, Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Gallant have also denounced the attack and called for calm.
A very disturbing incident indeed. And we go now to ILTV correspondent Devo Klein to give us the latest updates coming out of the Olympic Games in Paris. Devo, what can you tell us?
Hi, Lidar. So we have had an extremely packed day at the Olympics. The Israeli athletes brought their all. But let's focus on a few of the highlights coming out of Paris. So all eyes were on decorated Simone Biles yesterday and the Team USA powerhouse, which is currently dominating the floor gymnastics events. However, don't count out Israeli athlete Lihi Raz, who is currently placed 16th for women's vault and qualified the all-around women's qualification event. Raz is competing directly with the USA team and doing an incredible job, so much luck to her. On to Israeli judoka this morning, Timna Nelson-Levy. She had her initial match, which she won against Slovenia. We also have Baruch Shmailov and Geffen Primo, who also won their initial matches yesterday. Baruch finished his competition after a loss in round 16, while Geffen continued to the quarterfinals, but after 2 losses, she finished in 7th. In swimming, we have the 200-meter freestyle, where Leah Polansky finished 19th, and Denis Laktev, who qualified for the semifinals, finished in 16th. In the 100-meter breaststroke, Anastasia Gorbenko finished 7th and qualified for the semifinals, while Adam Maraana finished 28th. Tomorrow's schedule contains more swimming, judo, and sailing competitions, so we'll keep an eye out for swimmer Anastasia Gorbenko. Hopefully, we can come back with some medals soon.
For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at iltv.tv or download the ILTV Plus app. That's it for ILTV's weekly review. Stay safe and see you next week.